Good morning, students. So we have our math for Tuesday, October 20th. And as you can see, we have a worksheet that continues on with the same concepts that we learned yesterday, which is subtracting fractions from whole numbers. So this page is actually just like your book work that you did yesterday, except the problems are side by side. And actually, they're a little easier because the second numbers don't have any whole numbers. It's just the fraction. So as you can see, I did numbers 1 and 2 because I was working with a few students yesterday, but I'm going to go over 1 and 2 again and then maybe do one more just in case. So for number 1, we had 13 minus 2/3. So we just follow the same steps that we followed yesterday. So we have to take 1 from the 13. And that's what we did. So instead of 13, we have 12. And we had to make a fraction next to it. So we took the denominator from the fraction and we made a fraction next to our whole number, 3/3. So now we're left with 12 and 3/3 minus 2/3. So we're going to subtract our fraction first. So we're going to do 3 minus 2, which is 1. And then we have our denominator, 3. Then we would subtract our whole numbers, but because there's only one number, there's nothing to subtract it from. So we're left with just the original whole number, which is 12. So I decided to do number 2 because number 2 is a little bit of a tricky one because our whole number is actually 1, and that may be confusing, but it looks like it's the only one on your page. So what we do is when our whole number is 1, we just cross out the 1 and then we make a fraction out of the denominator. So it's kind of just like you're taking 1 away from 1, then you have nothing, and then you're making a fraction. So we crossed it out, we chose our fraction, which is 4, and we made 4/4 and then subtracted. So then that makes it much easier. 4 minus 3 is 1, and then our denominator is 4. So let's do another one just in case. So we have 13 minus 4/7. So we have to take 1 from the 13. So we have now 12. And then we have to use our denominator 7 to make a fraction. So now we have 12 and 7/7 minus 4/7. So we're going to subtract our numerator, 7 minus 4, which is 3. Keep our denominator 7 as usual, and then 12 minus nothing is just 12. So the whole number after you take 1 is going to stay the same for all of these. And one more. For number 4, we have 12 minus 14/20. So I don't want you guys to get intimidated by the big numbers because it's still all the same. So we have to take 1 from 12 and change it to an 11. And then make a fraction, in this case 20/20. And now we have to subtract, so we have 20 minus 14. So of course if you know this in your head, that's good, but if you need to, you would go 20 minus 14. We're left with 6. So 6 would be our numerator, and then our denominator is 20. And then 11 minus nothing is 11. So that's what you're going to do for the rest of the page. And just like yesterday, I will be on at 11 for any help and any one-on-one help that you might need as our fractions become a little bit more complicated and complex. So we will have 2 days of this kind of work. So you'll have a similar page tomorrow as well, just to make sure you get the practice in before we start our next fraction journey. And now for our language arts for Tuesday. So yesterday you started to diagram your subjects and verbs in sentences for the first time. And the reason why I gave you page 50 and 51 today is because page 50 is mostly just instructions, reminders, and references. So I'm going to go over 50 a little bit, and then you'll have an exercise on 51. So it says to just study these diagrams and to notice that the patterns are always the same no matter how the subject and verb are arranged in the sentence. So simply what that means is when you are doing your little diagrams where you do your verb and then your subject to the left, it's telling you that no matter where your verbs or subjects land in the sentence, the verbs always go to the right. So I'm just going to do a little reminder. And the subjects always go to the left. So that means that if you have a sentence where the verbs come before the subject, it still remains the same, that the verbs stay to the right. So it says for number 1, we have to diagram for an inverted sentence. So all that means is that the verb comes before the subject. So it says, in the tree sat a robin. So sometimes we can hear a robin sat in the tree, but in this case it's inverted, and that's okay. We still put the verb on the right. So that's why you always have to look for the verb first, even if you think you know what the subject is, because in this case for number 1, if you just go straight for the subject, you might get confused and write tree. But the sentence isn't actually talking about a tree. It's actually talking about a robin. But we wouldn't know that until we read the whole sentence and made sure that we identified our verbs first. So just like yesterday, it's just reminders to check for your verbs first and put them on the right. So the rest of them are pretty much the same thing. It's just the different kinds of sentences. So we have interrogative sentences, and remember for imperative sentences, the subject is you because the sentence is directed at you, but I will get to that a little bit more later. So although you have a lot of information here, really it's just simply letting you know that you have to put your verb to the right, your subject to the left. And again, just like yesterday, if it's an imperative sentence, which is a sentence that is making a command or a request, then you're going to put you, and it has it in parentheses, but you don't have to, because the sentence is making a command to you as the reader. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit on page 51, just so you realize that it's pretty much the same process as what we did yesterday. And later on, as we go on through the chapter, we might have to reference this page a little. So here on page 51, we're going to have similarities to what we did yesterday, Monday. So it says to underline the subjects once and the verbs twice. So make sure that you do that first. Try not to diagram right away, because you'll find it easier when you've identified your verbs and your subjects first. So just like yesterday, but this time you're underlining your subjects once and your verbs twice. So here it says, the box of money has been lost. So first, we're going to follow the steps and we're going to identify the verbs. In this sentence, it might be a little tricky, but the verb is has been actually, because although it's not really an action word that we're used to seeing, it's still a state of being verb. So we underlined it twice, and now we're going to underline the subject once. So we actually have a box of money. And now we're going to diagram. So remember, when you diagram, you put your vertical line. You write the verb to the right, so has been, and then your subject to the left. Box of money. Here for number 2, it says a strong wind blew yesterday. So first we're going to underline our verbs twice. So in this case, blew. And then our subject, a strong wind. But we only have to underline wind because that's the simple subject. Strong is an adjective. So we are going to diagram, put our vertical line, my verb to the right, my subject to the left. So we've diagrammed that. So you're going to do the same thing for 3 through 20. I know you guys might have some questions, and that's fine, but just try to identify whether or not the question is a command or a request. And sometimes there might be some state of being verbs in there. So not always is it an obvious action word. You might have like was, is, has been. Words like that also count as verbs. But just make a note of any questions that you have, make a little mark, and then I will be here to help you at 11. And here we have our vocabulary section in our spelling for list 9. And as usual, we have to look up our vocabulary words in the back of the book so that we know exactly what they mean. So we have memorial, memory, revise, and revision. So because those pairs of words are pretty similar, even if you think you know the word, I strongly encourage you to look them up in the back. So you're going to write your words spelled correctly on the top. You're going to look in the back and then match the definition, the meaning here, and then use just the 4 words to complete these sentences. I definitely recommend you read them out loud and that you pay close attention because we have those pairs that are similar. Memorial and memory can be confused, and revise and revision can easily be confused. So take your time, and of course we can work on it together as well. And here's just a reading reminder that we have chapter 15 today for our read-along. So join me at 11, bring your book, and remember that we have 4 read-alongs this week.